Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to Secretary of State John Kerry, Katie Pavlich, news editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Good morning to both of you ladies.
Good morning.
I don't know,
morning,
do you guys think this Raul Castro meeting on the tarmac's any big deal? It seems to me the big deal is that the president's there in the first place. Katie, start.
Well, I think it is a big deal, and I think that Donald Trump made the point that Raul Castro made it a point to meet with other important political figures and religious leaders to come to the country, and didn't make it a point to meet President Obama, which is an embarrassment to the United States. However, I want to point out that this isn't about Barack Obama, it's about Raul Castro and the fact that the Castro regime hasn't changed, and President Obama has legitimized throwing dissidents into prison for simply protesting, as we saw right before President Obama landed. We saw President Obama naively tweet yesterday, "What's up, Cuba?" when Cubans don't have the ability to tweet at all, not because there isn't just the infrastructure, but because the Cuban government doesn't allow it. President Obama is in Cuba without any preconditions for restoring human rights there. We don't get anything in return. They're still harboring convicted cop killers in Cuba who should be returned to the United States now that there's a new relationship. And yet here we are with the president celebrating as this historic moment when in fact it's an embarrassment and it really does a disservice to the people of Cuba.
That there is the larger point, or points I should say. My suggestion was they're meeting later today. There's a joint appearance tomorrow. Maybe they take questions, perhaps they don't. And they're going to have a lot of time together, Marianne. That's the point.
Exactly the point, Bill. I mean, the fact is there's a welcoming ceremony this morning with President Obama and Raul Castro. So that puts that aside.
And you're okay with that?
I am, because I think Donald Trump's comments has more to do with politics, which his supporters certainly will love those comments. And Donald Trump actually agrees with the re-engagement by President Obama with Cuba. So I think that says a lot. He's focused more on the politics and pomp and circumstance than the progress that's been made. Cuba is changing before our very eyes. Just months after we raised the American flag again at the embassy. And so the fact that, the fact that many business leaders have joined President Obama on this trip, that you have businesses already in place to run hotels there, trade agreements, Major League Baseball and others, the change that is happening that is desperately wanted by the people of Cuba, maybe not Castro, but the people of Cuba, is going to happen faster and faster and faster because of Barack Obama, not because of anybody else.
Katie, do you agree with that?
Not at all. The fact is that the Cuban regime hasn't improved its human rights record. The Cuban regime has proved that has not only not improved, but they've actually gotten worse when it comes to violating human rights. Again, I want to stress that there were dozens of dissidents thrown into jail prior to President Obama's arrival yesterday, and the narrative from the White House shouldn't be focused on President Obama making sure everyone knows that he's made a historic trip. The narrative and focus should be on the fact that there are people in Cuba who do not have the ability to assemble peacefully. They don't have the ability to exercise free speech, and they certainly don't have the ability to exercise free enterprise when President Obama isn't focusing on making sure that these new business deals that are struck with Cuba actually benefit the people and aren't controlled by the communist government.
Hey, I mentioned Ted Cruz. This is what he writes. Meanwhile, political prisoners languishing in dungeons across the island will hear this message. Nobody has your back. You're alone with your tormentors. The world has forgotten about you. There will be no mojitos at the U.S. Embassy for them, while Raul Castro denies their very existence. Marianne, last word. Go.
Cuba is changing, as it should, and will continue to change at a pace that the likes of which we have never seen, just like the Republican Party is changing as quickly as well. And the same people who can't see the change in Cuba are the same people who can't see the change in the Republican Party. No surprise there.
Thank you both, Marianne, Katie.
Thanks,
onward.
Bill.
Thanks to both.